Hi, my name is Sage Turk, and 2 years ago, something big happened that would change my life forever. Despite being an active Mormon, Christian, and believer for over 33 years, I lost my faith in God. What I didn't lose was my happiness, my hope, and the curiosity to explore every facet of this crazy adventure called life. And like every adventure, sometimes we can use a little guide.
Today's episode, Love, starring me, Sage, and my special guest host, mother of my children and earthly wife, Rachel Turk.
Infants on Thrones presents The New Atheist Guide to Not Being a Total Asshole.
Hello and welcome to the second to last episode of Season 1 of the New Atheist Guide to Not Being a Total Asshole. I am your host, as always, Sage Turk, and here with me today is someone who I'm legally obligated to call my favorite co-host to be on this show, and who also just happens to actually be my favorite co-host. The world debut of my wife, my beautiful spouse, Rachel. Hi, Rachel.
Hello.
Rachel is here not under duress, but under the effects of wine, correct?
Yeah, sure.
And those effects might increase, become more obvious as the episode goes on. But so happy to have you here, Rachel. Super excited to talk to you because today's episode is about love.
True love.
True love is what brings us together today. I wish I hadn't done that. But it's okay. So
we're doing the improv yes and, so you were just rolling with it.
I'm trying to roll with it. Today's episode was always planned on being love, but it's fortuitous that it's coming out in the season of love. If you're listening to it and it's not close to what your culture's season of love might be, whatever that is. Do you think other cultures have similar Valentine's Day sort of holidays?
I have no idea.
I've never even thought about that.
If it's universal or...
Do you really like a holiday to actually let your significant other that they're loved, or if you don't have a significant other,
that you are utterly and completely alone?
Feeling like a total loser? Yeah.
You know. Not sure.
Would you say that throughout your life, not counting our marriage, have you spent more Valentine's Days enjoying the day or feeling left out and bummed out by it?
I don't think I've ever been bummed out by Valentine's.
Because you've always had a boyfriend?
I mean, I did have boyfriends a lot, but I do remember, I think my senior year, I was free. And me and my girls, we hung out, and it was kind of nice. I remember going to the store and just seeing all the people getting their stuff and just being kind of I don't have to worry about that this year. That's kind of nice. So
are you and the girls, is that a euphemism, or did you actually have friends?
My wolf pack, if you will.
The
she pack, she wolves, whatever it is.
Yeah. Was that what your friend group was called? The she wolves?
Goodness, no.
Oh, that would have been cool.
No, it was me and my friend Rachel, which my name is Rachel. So it was Rachel, and Jenny. So...
It's one of my favorite bands.
Yeah.
2 Rachels and a Jenny. That rolls off the tongue. That's good. Okay. So most of your Valentine's Day spent with other boyfriends, huh? What were their what are their names and social security numbers?
It was too long ago. I don't remember. Like you said, a majority of them have been with you, so.
That is true. It's pretty crazy. So, we'll just disclaimer right here, right out the gate. This is not the type of episode that if you are have low tolerance for schmaltzy, cutesy, talking about relationship style kind of husband-wife banter, then yeah, this is just not the episode for you. But we have been married for... This is a pop quiz for you.
What do we just celebrated 13.
Yeah.
I always get, because I always kind of look ahead to the next one, so I'm always like, okay, we're like in our almost 14, which is really not right now, almost 14, because we just celebrated our 13th.
Celebrated 13 years, so we're getting so close, and we've spent 15 holidays together. That's kind of our little starting point, was during a holiday season, which we'll get into. But that's a long time. I mean, we're getting pretty close to like half our lives having been spent together.
It's true.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah, I was thinking about that the other day.
The better half.
Oh. Yeah, don't do that.
Okay. So let's step back pre-marriage. I like to kind of start each episode with a bit of a game, but this isn't so much of a game as more of a opportunity for us to share embarrassing details under the effects of this wine and then live to regret it later. So what I want to do is have each of us share our most embarrassing crush. And you can start.
Oh. Ladies first.
Ladies first, because I am a gentleman.
Well, I don't know if I've ever had an embarrassing crush.
We'll see about that. List them off.
Well, in high school, like junior high school age, I would say I really had a crush on Jared Leto on My So-Called Life. Oh. And I've watched it again in later years, and I'm like, man, he was a dick.
Well, was that what you were attracted to? Was the bad boy nature of Jared Leto?
He's just so pretty. He's just very pretty.
So
but I'm sure, like, most girls were attracted to, like, the dicks. I don't know.
The bad boys.
The bad boys. But he was just so rude. Like, I'm just like, oh my gosh. Like, and then, and there's the, like, sort of unrequited love of, like, her guy neighbor friend that she, like, grew up with. And I found, watching it as an adult, I was, like, cheering for him for sure.
Well, of course, but as a teenage girl who was an attractive teenage girl, those guys weren't even on your radar.
No.
Like, you had the luxury of liking the bad boy.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, I can't even imagine how many kids you friend zoned throughout the years.
There's a few I know of. Okay. Gavin Rosdell. From Bush. So.
Was it because people compared you to Gwen Stefani?
No. He was just super hot.
Man, I actually can't argue with that. I have to admit, yeah, I think Gavin Rosdale was an incredibly good-looking fellow. Australian accent? How do you even...
Musician?
I'm surprised you married me, yeah.
Yeah, it's got it going.
I'm like the opposite of Gavin Rosdale.
You got it going.
So you had a type. Ways. You had a type for a while.
I guess so.
And who else?
And I was like way into Blink-182. Travis Barker. Oh,
and the other guys.
Travis Barker was the one that I didn't like as much. Mark Hoppus and Tom DeLonge.
Mark and Tom were the two
lead
singers,
gosh.
And Travis was the skeezy drummer, yeah.
Yeah, nobody liked Travis. But Mark and Tom, me and my friend, we knew when their birthdays were, and we'd listen to them.
I mean, isn't that kind of like the live version of like Beavis and Butthead? Like,
what?
I mean, what is it about Blink-182? Just that they were good looking, kind of?
They were cute, and they had fun music. I loved their music. And then, of course, I've told you this as well, that, like, listening to them now, like, some music, like, I've definitely, like, will go back and, like, do my 90s jams. And then I put on Blink-182, and I'm like, you know what? This doesn't just age as well as some of that other stuff does.
So you find yourself asking, what's my age again?
What's my age?
As you listen to the music. Okay, the Blink-182 guys, that's a little...
Yeah.
I mean, this was like cut out pictures, make posters of them, scrapbook style, for your wall level, being in love with them. Correct?
Well, I had their albums. I'm trying to think if I had any picture. I know I had a picture or two, but I think they were just like, yeah, maybe from like magazines or something. But I did have a picture of Gavin Rosdell in my wallet for a while.
Just for when you needed like a little Gavin moment.
Yeah, and that was like junior high aged.
Is that how it was? Like quick pick me up, like you'd be in class feeling bummed, and then it was just like a little sneak peek, a little Gabby poo.
A little Gav, yeah,
just
something like
Gav
that.
attack.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So my first and most powerful celebrity crush, and this will probably be only less embarrassing simply because people might not even know who this is, but my biggest like crush in high school was Lily Sobieski.
Oh gosh.
Who, for those that don't know, is essentially a young, like Helen Hunt-esque looking person. But
Hey, I have a asterisk on that.
do you?
Well, one of my boyfriends in college actually had a crush.
One of your boyfriends? One?
Yes, one of them. He actually had a crush on the Helen Hunt. So you at least were doing a little better.
I feel like Helen Hunt is like a safe, like a mature woman to have a crush on, like in her prime. I mean, we're talking, that's a solid pick.
Like Twister,
Mad About You. Yeah, Lily Sobieski, star of such timeless films as Jungle to Jungle, or this weird Joan of Arc movie that came out early.
Yeah. What was the one? Oh, no, she was like the friend of like Drew Barrymore when like Drew Barrymore pretends to be a teenager.
Yes, Never Been Kissed.
Never Been Kissed. She was her nerdy friend in that.
So I have no idea why the package that was Lily Sobieski clicked inside of my teenage brain with such ferocity. I have no idea. But I had this whole fantasy that I would write her a letter that so eloquently expressed what a nice guy I was and how wonderful she was and all this stuff, because I had actually heard on some interview or seen something where she had said that she'd never had a boyfriend before or something. And so it was
surprising.
It was like, I got a chance, man. I got a chance. And I just had this picture of her loving this letter so much that she would, like, fly out to the boondocks of Oregon where I was living, and she would go to prom with me or something, and it would just happen. I would legitimately have this
I think there was
Hollywood
like
girlfriend.
a teen movie that was like that. I'm sure there were.
Based off of my life, yes,
Yeah.
of course. So that's mine. Yeah, crushes are weird, man. When I think back to being a teenager, when you are defining what love is, it's interesting how your body and mind change that perception. That's really what I want to talk about in today's episode, is how that's changed, because we, thank goodness, have gone through a pretty major change together, and along with it, I don't know about you, but my perception of what love is, even like how I feel it and who I feel it for, has changed. But before we dive totally into it, we'll do a little bit more prelude, and I want to sort of talk about, first and foremost, our relationship. So I thought we could recount briefly where we were at when we met and how we fell in love, which was kind of a interesting story, although not totally unheard of. Do you want to set the stage?
Okay. So I was in college up at Utah State. And I was pretty, I had some rocky times before, but I'd always been like pretty devout. Always believed. And I think at that point I was like really into the church. And I went home. That's just a little background about me, where I was at. But I ended up meeting Sage in my parents' ward down in Salt Lake. So I was living up in Logan. I went down to Salt Lake for the Christmas break. And lo and behold, I met the missionaries that were serving in my parents' ward, and Sage was one of them.
Dun dun dun.
Yeah.
Forbidden romance.
Definitely.
Missionary and girl technically living outside of his mission boundaries, thus technically not breaking rules.
Yes.
And yeah, no, that's about it. So we're talking circa 01, 02.
It was 02.
02, yeah, so Christmas of 02.
Yeah.
You're down visiting. I'm serving in your parents' ward. I've already struck a pretty close relationship with your folks because they're one of those like power families in the ward that actually feeds the missionaries and actually goes on splits and actually invites them over.
Which is, I mean, is a pretty sad word. So, I mean, it didn't take much to be awesome. But compared to, in general, they were very awesome.
I would say throughout my mission, they were at least they were a top 5 family in terms of like that right level, at least for me, of they never encouraged us to break the rules. They weren't like the family that would like take us to the movies, but they were the family that was always very gracious to have us over and would drop off food and actually started writing your mom when we left that ward. Anyway, so you're down. It's Christmas time, December.
Yes. And do you want me to tell more about that, or?
Yeah, how do we fall in love?
Okay, so we saw each other. I remember it being the Christmas party. You remember it being going to church first.
Well, I know the first time I saw you was pre-Christmas party, but
Okay.
Again, you're a pretty girl who's not paying attention to schmucks, really. So
Either way, I do remember seeing you like at church and at the Christmas party. But I know the first time we talked was at the Christmas party.
Yep, so we're at a Christmas party.
I had come down to sing for the party, and I noticed that I do remember that I had seen you at church before, because I kind of wondered if the missionaries were going to be there, because I did remember seeing you at church and thinking you were cute. And so I was like, oh, I wonder if they're going to be at the party. And lo and behold, he was at the party. And near the end of the party, we was definitely...
Did it?
Yeah, we talked.
Yeah, which is like missionary home base.
Yeah. So we were talking, and I thought it, and you were asking about school and stuff, and you told me, oh, I'm planning on going to Utah State after my mission. I'm like,
Which was a lie.
Which was a total lie. I found out later.
I was 100% planning on going back to BYU, Idaho, baby, where I had an incredible freshman year.
Yeah.
And yet, in order to generate small talk, yeah, sure, why not? I'll float the idea of attending Utah State,
Yeah.
school I'd never even heard of before.
Didn't even know where it was. So we talked about that, and the whole time he's just looking at the floor. And I was like, oh, how cute. He's such a good missionary. Like, he won't even look at me. So, anyways,
It's truly a miracle, and this comes from somebody that doesn't really believe in miracles, that you actually even noticed or cared. It was certainly my most derpy, schlumpy
yes.
period of my life.
And it was endearing.
And awkward.
It was endearing, so it
You must
worked.
have been really into the church.
I was way into the church.
Yeah.
So anyway, so we, my parents had invited the missionaries over for brunch on Christmas. So we hung out on Christmas. And then I think Sage actually planted the idea in my mom's brain to invite them over for New Year's. So...
I mean, certainly dropped some, hey, yeah, we're not doing anything. Don't know if you guys are.
Yeah.
type
So
of thing.
so anyway, so we hung out till 9 on New Year's Eve because you had to be back to your apartment.
Yeah.
So anyway, so we hung out a couple times, and then it was the last Sunday before I was going back up to school, and I knew I needed to like get his email or some way to like keep in touch with him. I had that feeling. The spirit touched me, told me I needed to keep in touch with this boy. So Sage felt the same way, and so we ended up like after sacrament, he came up to me. I was like, hey, and he's like, thinking maybe I could write to you. I was like, so that he's like, in case I have any questions about applying to Utah State.
Wink, wink.
I was like, oh, yeah, sure. That sounds, yeah, that would be good. I could totally help you out with that. So we exchanged email, and then we ended up we started emailing, started out once a week. And we write letters too. And we looked back at them recently, and we were thinking, it took forever for things to happen. It's literally 3 weeks into writing each other, we were signing our letters, love.
Which was kind of the moment. And for me, the memorable moment was that we were writing letters, and each time it was just from Elder Turk or whatever, or your friend or signed or something.
Yeah. Your pal.
And I remember thinking it was this was the sign, because I was like, I'm actually gonna do it. I'm gonna sign my letter, love. And
I think you signed it love Sage, not love Elder Turk.
Probably too.
Because that would be really weird.
It was a very weird time. Such a weird courtship. The during mission courtship, it's so sexually frustrated and awkward and bizarre. And also having to work around these weird rules. For instance, this was not a time when we had easy access to email. And I went through hell and back to try and get this little portable email-y machine in these early days of the internet. So, long story short, I write a letter, sign it love, having no clue how you're going to respond to it. I put it in the mail. Before it could have ever even gotten to you, you had a letter waiting for me in the mailbox that when I opened it was the first time you had written love, Rachel.
Yes.
And it was
it was meant to be.
It was meant to be. It was a magic moment. And then we spent the next 9 months essentially totally never seeing each other, never talking in person, but writing almost daily. I think it was almost
twice. Daily. It became twice daily. We'd wake up and write to each other, and then by the end of the day. I had a little more flexibility, so shocking, to write when I wanted to, but so it's I would wake up and get his morning letter, and then I would send him something off, and so vice versa, I just go back and forth like that. But
and it was essentially a strange blend of almost entirely church and mission related stuff, about as platonic, honestly, as you're gonna get.
Well, we read the Book of Mormon and the Doctrine and Covenants together, and so we talk about that every day.
Verses daily, yes.
And we just talking about what's happening on his mission and what's happening in school or whatever. It was very, very much spiritual base.
Oh, totally.
But also getting to know each other, without all the physical stuff.
Yes, and although it was very platonic, we still somehow managed to plan our wedding.
Yes, we
via email.
In those 9 months, and again, I think probably 3 weeks in we said love. I think by 2 months in, we probably knew that we were gonna get married.
Oh yeah. Well, when you have 2 letters arrive at essentially the same time, both people signing their names love, it's a given. There's no greater sign.
Yeah. Well, and being a Mormon girl, your greatest duty is to find a spouse, and so that was definitely on my mind.
Yeah.
So
we were all hot to trot, and we had it all planned out. We knew it was going to happen. I get off my mission.
You fly home
to Oregon, almost instantaneously fly back to Utah. Somehow talked your dad into letting me borrow one of the extra, the one extra car they had.
I don't think it was an extra car, but...
I mean, he obviously had another vehicle somehow, but one of his cars, and this is not like a handsomely rich man, this is just a regular guy that had a Mazda CRX laying around.
Honda
CRX, sorry. I had a Mazda 323, a similar small hatchback. Anyway, he picks me up from the airport, and I essentially take this car up to Logan to go woo his daughter. I knock on the door of your apartment. Your first time ever seeing me in 9 long months. And here I am, sans glasses, actually
regular
in
clothes.
regular clothes. Door swings open. There she is in all of her glory. She's watching TV with her friends. She looks at me and then turns back to her TV. Totally denied.
And then double take back and jumped up and ran for the door. But yes, I didn't recognize you at first.
That double take felt like a long time. Total denial. But anyway, so then basically it was back and forth between Oregon and Utah. Driving that little car. Snow, rain, sleet, or shine.
For 3-ish months.
For about 3-ish months, and we were married in December. So I had gotten home in September, mid-September, and we were married by December. So whirlwind romance.
Yes. And the thing is we felt it. We felt that the Spirit had confirmed it to us. My mom, while he was still on his mission, also felt the Spirit confirm it to her. My bishop's wife also felt the Spirit confirm it to her. And so it was kind of like all these people were like, yes, we definitely felt like blessed and it was meant to be and all that stuff. And it was,
Meanwhile, my mom was very dubious of the situation. And thus, I still feel bad about this to this day, took her to the temple to break the news. I felt I had to sweeten the deal or else she wouldn't buy off on it. And this is a total ends justify the means sort of white lie. Basically told her that I had this dream of you before I'd ever even met you. That I saw my own wedding, and I saw this beautiful brunette curly haired woman, and then I met you. Boom. Done deal. She was bought in. Totally bought it. Meanwhile, I'm thinking it's essentially what happened, kind of. I just gave her a truncated version, got her feeling the Spirit. Obviously, Spirit can be manipulated in that way. So, and here we are, 15 years
14
later. Well, 15 since that Christmas party.
14 years, but anyways.
If we're counting true years, that's true. So that's the story, dear listener, of our whirlwind romance.
And for those that are still listening.
Those that are still listening, this is so fascinating. Everyone loves hearing
Don't you love?
A good meet-cute story.
And doesn't anybody want to hear, my birth stories? People love that, too.
People love hearing about your dreams. That's always a crowd favorite.
Yeah, you want to hear about my dream last night?
Craziest dream.
Inside joke.
This period of time, how would you say that this concept of love changed? Do you have
that's a very big, broad question.
Do you have phases that you can sort of think of in your mind? Because certainly it wasn't.
Okay, so this is just what's coming to mind.
Okay.
I was 20, almost 21 when I got married. I was pretty young. I felt like, oh yeah, I'm ready, I was ready. I mean, in a lot of ways, I was ready to be married and did a very good job at it. We've had a really good marriage. I look at my cousins that are now about that age that are getting married or friends or whatever. I see them, I'm just like, you're too young. What are you doing? And realizing in a lot of ways, truly how, I thought I knew Sage. I thought I knew myself. you know. But it's like, I go back and, you know, we read our letters or whatever, and it's just like, these are completely different people. And just like, how lucky, like truly lucky we are that it's like still worked out. Because, I mean, I have plenty of friends that, you know, been divorced and remarried a couple times, you know.
Oh, I mean, we've officially been married longer than my folks, even. So.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So I almost know nobody in my life who's been married as long as we have, which is crazy.
Yeah, and so it's, you know, and going through a faith transition, you know, you get on ex-Mormon Reddit or any of those things, and you see all these people who, you know, they end up getting divorced or whatever, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. You know, if it's truly not working out, you know, that's what you need to do. But just realizing it's just like, whoa, like this could have gone so many ways, like, you know, as, you know, getting married so young and naive. And I think there are some benefits of getting married young and naive, you know, as opposed to waiting. But there's a lot of people have a lot of difficulties, and so yeah, I mean, truly like thinking I knew you and thinking I knew myself, and to a sense like we did, but you change. I mean, like, you know, there's the story of like the woman who's like, I've been married, like I've had 5 different husbands, but I've only been married once, you know. And it's because, you know, her husband went through 5 different changes in life, and he was 5 different sorts of people. And I think we each do that. Like, we go through different stages, and the younger you get married, the more you end up changing throughout that marriage, and it may not always work out between you and that other person. So,
well, I mean, I definitely know that I, you know, in being honest, like, fell in and out of love with you dozens of times, hundreds of times throughout our marriage. You know, it was sort of like a snake shedding its skin. It's like, you know, although we were changing, I think that we were patient enough with each other and bought in enough, which really I do, you know, give credit to my church upbringing. It's like marriage is like the most sacred institution, you know, and I had a parent who cheated a lot, and so I definitely, you know, for me, one of the greatest values a person could have is like marital fidelity, you know.
Right.
So it's just like, well, I'm in this for eternity, so I guess I better make it work.
Yeah.
You know, but it was certainly not automatic and not entirely easy, but it was something that I could feel that cycle happen, that cycle of like, oh, we're changing, and I would change a bit, and then you would catch up, or you would change a bit and I would catch up. And I feel like one of the most momentous examples of that really was when both of us kind of secretly were going through like major faith crises, right?
Yeah.
At about the same time, although neither one of us wanted to talk about it, because the reason most people don't want to talk about these things is because they're terrified of what their spouse is going to react with, or what they're going to suddenly think of you, you know. And both as a Mormon man and woman, like, you've had these certain expectations you have to fulfill for your spouse, you know, these certain things that you don't want them, like, you don't want people to see weakness. You're not taught to really talk about your sins, your past flaws. I was terrified of you ever finding out, you know, that I had done things I was ashamed of in high school, or even done things I was ashamed of, you know,
right,
while married. Not that they were big things, but, you know,
yeah.
It's just like, I have to be the strong man, I have to be perfect. And here I am, secretly, frankly, questioning the existence of God himself, you know, and that's nuts. And I was always bought in to suffering in silence, that I had to weather this on my own, and if I just have to be quiet and suck it up and do it for the rest of my life so that she doesn't catch wind of it, I was all in. And that was crazy making.
Yeah.
It was like the ultimate in living like dual lives. the inner life of turmoil, question, fear, sadness, depression, anxiety, questions, and yet having to be, I had big callings in church, having to being a father, being your husband, not wanting any of that to show. Lo and behold, you were going through similar things.
It's all such a whirlwind now. I'm trying to remember. I'm like, okay, what was it exactly? What was I feeling? I always I know sort of definitely the first thing for me was Prop 8 was the first time kind of disagreeing with the church, I guess, and with leaders. And there was no ifs, ands, or buts that they were wrong. I was like, no, I can't stand with this.
Well, you were definitely the first of the two of us to find this really sort of compassionate heart towards the LGBT community.
Yeah. Well, but I think those were, and I just think it maybe because it's just in the news and in the culture and stuff. I think almost, from the first year of our marriage, I remember us having conversations and you had some very interesting thoughts that kind of pushed me, which we don't need to get into all that right now. But anyways, by the time Prop 8 came around, my feelings on it were different from what the churches were. But I remained active. I didn't really necessarily think much of it. I thought it was completely okay for me to disagree. And so time goes on.
I don't think, and I know you wouldn't have put it in terms of disagreement, because I remember struggling through that and trying to find ways for you to admit freely this concept of disagreeing. But I know that you were able to readily find find scriptures, or you're able to find quotes or find things that felt like it was giving you the latitude to have this kind of alternate interpretation of things.
Yeah.
But I don't think you ever would have admitted at the time that it was straight up just disagreeing with the brethren.
Yes and no, but yeah, it was kind of I looked at our own history and our history of marriage issues with, polygamy is it's that in and of itself, we should have more empathy for wanting to practice marriage in different ways. I was like, why can they not even see that? Not to say that I want them to bring polygamy back, but...
Well, it does feel...
But it feels
very much like the senior in high school now bullying the freshmen, even though they were devastated as freshmen and being bullied,
Yeah.
It's now we're the big fish in the pond, and...
Yeah.
The irony is certainly lost on them, that's true.
Yeah. So, anyways, but, I still believed, I still had this all, kept going, all that stuff. But I think as time went on, I've always been a very independent person, and started maybe coming up with kind of my own beliefs, which I think the church gives room for. They give room for personal revelation and interpretation and stuff. So it's I was kind of coming up with kind of how to justify my own beliefs and feelings, especially when they were different than what I was being taught at church. And but that narrative was becoming more and more dissonant.
And what was it besides LGBT issues? Do you think were sort of your main personal sort of beliefs, or your main things to try and figure out in your own way?
Oh gosh. Again, it's so hard to put myself back in that place.
Was it polygamy?
Well, yes, I was going to bring that up. Polygamy is definitely part of it, and stuff like that. Again,
was there something that sparked this sort of interest or looking into polygamy, or what was it? Because up until this point, just trying to lay it out there, because I think others are in our situation, so it's good to kind of hear, what did you read, where did you go? Because I know at this point you were not. I was the scholar.
Yeah, so Sage was
church history nonstop.
Yeah, so he knew all this stuff, and I didn't necessarily have a great desire. I'd read a few books that he had given me, but they were all apologist books. So, but they were interesting. Like, I think it finally, I think one of the first things, like I was in the primary presidency, and then I was the primary music person. And so I spent a lot of time in primary, and I was just like I was starving for like knowledge and interest and like digging deeper. Like I just needed it. And there was a lot of stuff happening. It's like I was seeing friends posting about like, wear pants to church on Sunday, and kind of being like intrigued by that, but also kind of scared of it. So it's like starting to be exposed. Like I heard about Mormon stories and feminist Mormon housewives, all these, it was really a lot of podcasts. And like the one that I kind of first plugged into was the, Mormon Sunday School podcast. And on there, it was very much like pushing the envelope of like discussing things in an intellectual sort of exciting, more compassionate, more interesting. And it just was like, it was feeding what I needed like at that time. But it started bringing up like all these questions that I was like, oh, like it was a little bit scary and exciting to actually like think of those things. Cause like one of the questions would be like, like learning about the atonement. And it was like, okay, well, let's just theoretically, like, let's look at it. Like, do we really need an atonement? Do we really need this? Like, and so it like pushed these boundaries that were like almost taboo to like talk about, but he did it in a very safe, like, doesn't necessarily have to be this way, but let's at least just like think of it. This
is Jared Anderson, the host of Mormon Sunday School. Yeah.
So it like got me to just in a safe way to start thinking maybe a little more in broader terms about the world,
kind of like
and life.
These what ifs.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it would be a very basic sort of philosophies.
So at this phase, and I would say it was probably at least a year, you were getting really into, like you said, podcasts. I mean, you were listening voraciously to like all these things.
Yeah, and then I was starting to read some books.
You read In Sacred Loneliness
and Rough Stone
Rolling. And so you had gotten this bug that I had sort of like during mission, sort of like pre, during, and just after. I, meanwhile, about when you were starting to get into it, just a little bit prior to that, is when I had my major traumatic experience of basically just losing my faith in God, right? So I had this moment that I've shared in pieces, but it was basically, for the first time ever in my mind, I had an experience of passing out and really just being gone for a long enough time that when I awoke, it was like, wow, could that be what death is like? Because I had no consciousness. It was just lost time.
Yeah.
And if I would have hit a rock at that point, and if I would have died at that point, then I would just be gone, and I wouldn't know any better. And that thought struck me with such, like, oh shit, like, is that even possible? Like, do I dare even ask the question? I mean, I probably spent about a year, maybe a little bit less than a year, just terrified to even broach the subject, although I really did believe in God up until that point.
Right.
And in fact, I had talked to him constantly, and I was an insane believer. I was about as TBM as you can get,
Right.
I would fawn over Joseph Smith. I loved bearing my testimony. I loved studying the scriptures. Well, at this point, it led to essentially the most heartfelt prayer I had ever made, silently in our bed with you sleeping next to me, and being devastated, right?
Right.
Asking, pleading, begging for anything, just the tiniest, smallest little pinprick of the Spirit, that assurance that there's somebody out there, and getting nothing. Like, it ruined me. Like, I almost can't believe how I functioned. I don't think I did very well. Anyway, so I was now in a state that I was Mormon. I was still actually what I would consider TBM, but I didn't really believe in God.
Right.
I wasn't willing to say it. I wasn't willing to, like, claim the title atheist. But I would find myself in Sunday school, like, I suddenly had to, like, kind of start asking questions about my atheist friend, quote unquote,
Yes, there were many a discussion about Sage's atheist friend.
My theoretical atheist friend.
And it comes out it was actually Sage.
So it was me all along, but I can never say I have had these thoughts, or I've had different thoughts about morality and how it could actually be more moral to be atheist. Anyway, so you were studying hard, and I had found myself in this state where it was so painful to crack open the scriptures. It was so painful to fake a prayer, or to actually try to pray. All of it was like, I would get sick inside. I would get knots in my stomach. So you were going full bore, and it was funny, like, I actually, for the first time ever in my life, was like avoiding it like the plague. I didn't want to listen. I didn't listen to any.
Yeah. I was so excited to be like hearing all these new things, and I tell him, and I'm like, you should really listen to this podcast. And he's just like, oh, yeah,
I mean, I didn't even know who John DeLynn was until you had shared with me his TED Talk. Yeah. I was like, oh, okay, this guy sounds okay. I like that. I did find the LGBT thing, was like inspiring me. Like suddenly I had a purpose. It was like, wow, I'm fine. I'm a middle-class white male in the church. I haven't felt depressed, but
married with kids,
and so I suddenly felt this like purpose inside. But I can't imagine, like, now I'm thinking about it, and it makes perfect sense, like, why, as your shelves were cracking, I just have to assume that, like, in your eyes, like, my distance, my not wanting to listen to the podcast, my not wanting to, like, engage, like, did that come off to you as, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, I could have seen,
like, maybe that you were fearful of it or disinterested, or more because you believed rather than,
or that I was retrenching almost, where I was falling apart. I was unraveling. I could easily have seen it like, no, I'm one of those TBMs that's like, I won't even go near it.
Yeah. No, because I knew you had studied the stuff. I mean, the first time I'd heard of Sunstone was from you, and when you had told me about Sunstone, I was like, it wasn't that I was disinterested, it was just not the time in my life to, like,
right.
It's like I had a baby. I was like, I don't have time to be reading Sunstone, but
right.
But anyway, so it was kind of like I would talk. I enjoyed because I would talk to you about the stuff, but
which by the way, just like it's sparking. I've seen, as you mentioned, ex-Mormon Reddit. There's all these posts, and I think sometimes as ex-Mormons, we've come along this like huge journey. And the spectrum starts to feel more, ironically black and white than it used to. And I actually know that some of the stuff that started me on my journey were things like Sunstone, which is like, it's very much, these are believing people, Yeah. It's like, it's safe, but it's kind of like alternative Mormonism, It's like that New Order Mormonism. Like, there are enough things out there that I think can spark. If you're finding, like, hey, I can't get my spouse to read the CES letter... It's like, whoa, man, like, that's like turning it up to 11. Like, you might need to back away, and you might need something like Mormon Sunday School.
Mormon Sunday School, Sunstone, these things that just, like, that are still, like, believing, but just, like, looking at it from different ways and giving you different answers than the Sunday School manual answers, which I think is the way to start.
It's all you need, and you can inspire this sort of, like, love in somebody of thinking deeper, And even if it is thinking deeper from approved LDS sources, there's enough stuff out there that can give you the spark of exploration. Anyway, I think this is all relevant. This is important because both of us are struggling silently for years. And I remember feeling pretty, like, getting pretty dark a couple of times. I remember working out in the yard or something and just feeling like I just had this epiphany. It's like nothing is more lonely. You can never be more lonely than actually being with someone that you feel like you can't talk to.
Yeah.
Like, I've felt loneliness as a single person, but it was never as dark and as deep of a loneliness as being 2 feet away from somebody
you can't talk to,
who you love but you feel so separated from.
Yeah.
And so that eventually cracked, and you were the one to crack.
Yeah.
Or you were the one to finally
Yeah, and
Say something.
and at that point, again, it's like I don't remember quite along the timeline, like how much I had been listening to those things, or if that was kind of, if it cracked and then I started doing those things. I don't remember, but basically, it was just I just wasn't like I was just having cognitive dissonance. Everybody,
You were having cognitive dissonance. We were in the shower. You just started crying.
I just couldn't keep it in anymore.
You just couldn't keep it in. You lost it. And the thing, and why earlier I had made the note about you not being willing to admit that you disagreed. Because that's the thing I remember you saying. Like, that was your way of saying, like, something's happened, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember it was like, I just disagree. I don't agree with the brethren on, and it was, at that point, LGBT stuff was really the thing that came out.
Yeah.
I remember we sort of circled around, because it was just so cut and dry. I mean, it's just like, if you have a heart inside of you, you just can't help but feel empathy for this hopeless situation. Anyway, so you admit to this horrible secret you have, and it was like simultaneously one of like the best and worst moments of my life. Like, worst because I was like seeing this pain and thinking like, oh my gosh, hey, here's this person I love that's been suffering this whole time, and I've been an idiot not paying attention. But also, like, the best, it was just like, are you kidding me? Like, me too. And I remember, I think that was like the response.
Yeah.
It was just like, honey, look at my eyes. I feel exactly the same way.
And I remember that moment, and it was like, I mean, really like this whole new level of like connection with you.
Right.
Where it's just like, oh my, like, yes, like, oh my gosh, like, why was I so scared for so long? And
Right.
and the problem is, you know, it could have gone in, and that's why I say, like, I feel so lucky with our marriage and relationship, because it could have gone any number of ways. It really could have.
Oh, and it's this huge Hail Mary. And some marriage and plenty of marriages have failed.
Yeah. And we
Due to that.
have family members who, you know, it's like where one really has been struggling and one had no clue, but they saw the pain that person was in and cared enough to take the time to actually like
Right.
dig in.
And it's interesting because I do feel like up until that point, it was a majority, it was like a jawbreaker, all these layers of what our love and relationship was, and most of the layers were the church.
Yeah.
There was so much there that was the church. But I feel, I mean, it's a miracle, it's a blessing, it's incredible that there was a kernel there that was like, no, I love her for her. She loves me for me, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that we were able to catch hold of that because, frankly, all of that, when that church facade shattered, love and my love for you changed in this incredibly profound way. So much so, and this was from this honesty. I mean, we at that point were like, and it wasn't like instantaneously like blurting out everything.
Yeah.
But for the first time ever in our marriage, you know, we were able to admit flaws.
Yeah.
We were able to talk about things that had happened in our past, you know?
Yeah.
Big things. And we were able to just be honest with one another. And the love I felt for you at that point was a totally different beast than this thing that I thought was love that we had when we were married. Because frankly, the thing that I thought we had was, I see it now as being like this sort of superficial attraction, you know?
For sure, yeah.
I mean, there was a responsibility there. There was, you know, social pressure. There was lust. There was, you know...
Yeah.
There were things like, you know, like how we conflate morality as members of the church with things that don't actually count as morality, you know, things like modesty, things like piety, things like reverence, things like, you know, and I remember feeling like I did have to like hide this piece of me that I knew I always had, but I had to tamp down, which was just things like
Your humor.
my humor or the types of movies I would like, you know. It's like I grew up watching rated R movies, you know, not feeling too guilty about it. We're kind of lax, but that's the sort of thing I like had to hide, you know.
Yeah.
looking at pornography, which every man on the planet has done, that like things of that nature were things that I never in a million years would have ever even I would have kept taking those secrets
to the grave. Yeah.
And yet now we're in a space where it's like gaining the courage to actually field these questions, these admissions. And there was a few where it'd be like, whoa, I gotta process that for a minute.
Yeah.
But that like honest, open love, like the raw love.
Imperfect.
Of someone laid to bare. And I think the best way that I can explain like how this love changed in my mind is the experience of when, I don't know if it was the first time, but really in my mind is sort of the first time we ever talked about divorce.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about that?
You probably do a better job at it than me, but yeah, you had brought it up, and it was one of those things where it was kind of like talking about like getting, like it's possible for us to get divorced. I don't know if but it was scary. It like scared the crap out of me because it's like I don't want to get divorced, but it's like, but before, and I think the point you were making, when we brought it up, was like, before it like wasn't a possibility. Like even if we were miserable, hated each other, whatever, it's like it wasn't working or whatever, it's like we would never have gotten divorced. Like you had promised that, like you're like, I will never divorce you, like I will never cheat on you, all this stuff, like, and now it was this thing where it's like, you know what, divorce is a possibility and that's okay, but today and now, like we're choosing to be married, and kind of taking away that it's like this is a forced thing into becoming like a choice.
That's exactly right. It suddenly became apparent that this love was a choice we had to make. And it wasn't something that was a given. I think that was the change, right? It's these promises that you're made as a member of the church, and you'd hear it a million times. It's like any two people, two righteous individuals, no matter who they are, right? If they're righteous and they put God first, like they will have a happy relationship and there'll be love,
Yeah.
Or that love is something, this is like eternal magical thing, right? Yeah. Or that it is given to you from an external source, and thus it's like it's a never-ending source of power that will come your way if you just open yourself to it. No, like realizing that I have to choose love,
to choose it and work at it.
And not only that, but it's not a automatic choice. It's not an easy choice sometimes. Like, in order to choose this love, you have to give something up, right? And that was for me like this understanding that, okay, if I'm choosing to love you, that means that I'm not choosing other people,
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm not choosing these other things, or I'm not choosing some stuff that, personally I would want to, I would do if I were alone or something. It's the sacrifice of love,
mm-hmm.
And realizing that it was legitimately a sacrifice, not something that I'm like putting on loan, these things I want to do, and then I'll get back 100-fold. It's like, no, in the course of this lifetime, the love I'm choosing with you, for instance, is a monogamous love,
Mm-hmm.
And that means giving stuff up. And so all these little, even though they were not fully formed and they'd come and go and it wasn't really like taken seriously, but the little fantasies you have, about, oh, well, if I wasn't married to her, then I would, what would I do? Where would I go? And who else would I be with? Or these things, these little thoughts that run through your head that I think earlier in our marriage, when it was like, well, love was a guarantee and I'm just in it for the long haul. I need it's like in this weird, like in this kind of ironic way, those thoughts had more play in my mind because I hadn't definitively said, no, I'm choosing this, get out of here,
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. And now it was like, oh, wow, this thing is fragile. Like, if we've changed so much, like, how many bullets did we dodge over the course of 15 years, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And changing bodies and changing life circumstances and changing, you know, responsibilities and parenthood and all this stuff. And somehow we're on enough of a wavelength, right?
Mm-hmm.
That it's worth maintaining. But recognizing that, okay, life changes. And tomorrow I could change, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And you could change. And so this constant re-upping, this renewal, this description of love that basically we have, like, that's what changed my whole understanding of love as a concept. Because losing my belief in God, I mean, it forced me to reevaluate every given that I had in my life. You know, everything, including the fundamental nature, like, is there even good, you know?
Yeah.
Is there bad? And certainly love found itself in those crosshairs. Is there even actually such thing as love? Because I know in my logical brain, and now it's like, you know, as I consider it, it's like, yeah, it's a chemical response. I can actually feel sometimes the chemicals wash through my brain, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's like sometimes I'm cognizant enough to sense that sort of, like, you know, heat rising and kind of waning and these triggers, and yeah, it's a biological response, but, you know, everything that we experience is somehow a biological response, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's a stimuli. And love is one of those things that, for me, still retains enough magic for me to hold it as, like, a true, like a truth, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, love is a real thing. You know, real love is a real thing. But it's not automatic, and it's not like everybody is guaranteed to have it type of thing. And so recognizing, it's almost like when you recognize that the earth and our existence are not givens, that they're almost cosmic flukes. And that makes it all the more interesting and miraculous, frankly. Love feels the same way too. That somehow this primal need to, like, procreate, the primal need for sort of like safety in society or whatever, can transmute into a feeling that's different from those basal things, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that I don't feel like we need. Like, humans could be humans and be just as successful and be a society without the sort of real love that now I feel for you. And yet we got it, you know? We evolved into this. And that's magical. So love, it's about as real for me as anything else, and is now more real. And so one of the things I want to segue to is now the role that love plays in our life, and how that's different from when we were members, and really just that idea of who do we love, how do we love, and how it's changed. So have you noticed, because I've just been talking a lot, what now when it comes to, like, loving, let's just say loving other people, so this is now more of a platonic, you know, brotherly, sisterly, or just, you know, empathetic love, if you will. Do you feel a difference now?
I would say building through my, what I liked to call at the time, a faith transition. A lot of my quote unquote beliefs, or the things that I was, like, you know, believing in and all that, it was all based on love. And so I remember getting up in sacrament meeting, and I was shaking, and I didn't want to be there, and getting up and sharing my testimony just about love. And it was, you know, and that was all that I bore testimony of. It was like, I basically got up and I was like, you know, basically my life has been shattered. I'm building from the ground up, but what I'm building with is love. And, having so many people positively react to that. And part of my reason for leaving the church was because of love. And the time that we've been out has been really hard. And sometimes it's been really hard to feel that love that kind of brought me out of the church. This is probably not where you're wanting it to go. But it's like I was feeling so much love for just humankind and humanity, and that's what brought me out of the church. And when I chose to leave, I found myself like kind of flat on the floor and alone, other than, with you. And since then it's been a struggle sometimes to feel that same sort of like love and passion that I felt at that time. Because I have felt so alone. But that's really what brought me to where I'm at now, was love of humankind. And of course, with all the stuff that's happening in our country with politics, makes it even harder. But I really, one of the things that I really try to do is try to see things from the other side and try to have love for those others. And so for a while, it was always me trying to preach to the people who didn't get the LGBT thing or the disenfranchised, like, you guys need to learn how to love them. And it was like, yeah, that's true. But it's like, but I also needed to learn to love those people, and try to understand, like, why is it that they are the way they are. So that's been a struggle. And, anyhow, yeah, I don't know.
Well, it blows your mind when you find yourself, when it comes to love, at odds with the organization that you feel like taught you what love was.
Right.
And so to feel like I have this empathy and this, like, I have this compassion for these people, and it feels like what I've heard described as Christ-like love, charity,
Right.
Like a love without bounds, an unconditional love, a love that doesn't personally, like, it's not like I personally benefit from this thing. I have no ulterior motives, really. It's just that this is another human being in trouble,
Yeah.
And my heart goes out to him in love. And to feel like you're somehow wrong, or you're wrong for your love, or you're now in opposition to the organization that taught you, proper love. Like, that's crazy making. It's crazy.
Yeah.
To feel that way. I know that I felt that even though I preached, and I truly did feel that I had Christ-like love for my fellow man, And I remember being on my mission and having these, like, feelings, or claiming to have these feelings, And this idea was just that, in my mind, love meant that it was really more pity,
Yeah.
If somebody wasn't doing all the right things, I was at least of a nature that I didn't actively oppress, or say mean or hurtful things, like that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But did I really love people? No. And I know that because I remember how I would go through my day, and I remember, like, the first impulses I had for when I saw people. If I saw somebody sitting at a cafe, and they were drinking a beer, that would catch in my mind, And I was like, that person's drinking a beer. The first things I would notice are all the things they were doing that were against my standards, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
And so instead of my first impulse being this either neutral feeling, it was always this it was this judgmental feeling, right? And so when I say I loved my fellow man, I really meant that, like, I felt I had a duty to save them from themselves,
Yeah.
I didn't love who they were. And that total like bullcrap saying like hate the sin, love the sinner, you know?
Yeah.
Nobody even knows what that means. And frankly, if you're willing to start from a level of like, well, hate one thing about somebody, you know, hate a part of their life, but love this other part, that doesn't work, you know?
No.
And so I came to this realization that was like, you know, the church has done a much better job teaching me what to hate and what to fear and what to despise and what to pity, you know?
Yeah.
And what needed to change and what was defective. Taught me those things way better than it actually taught me how to love the person.
Yeah.
And so coming to this realization that, I'm sorry, but like any organization that's better or that primarily focuses on what to hate can never really tell you how to love. That's where suddenly, like leaving the church, I found myself instantaneously able to at least empathize. And I don't know if it's like love is even the right word, because that's maybe too strong of a word. But I went from like instantaneously judging anybody, everybody, based on their garment line or lack thereof, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Just these little snap judgments. Suddenly it was like, oh, I'm totally cool with that person. I see somebody jogging on Sunday who I'm all, you know, immediately in my mind as a member, I'm doing the Rain Man calculations in my head. Like, well, that must mean he's not a member. That must mean he's like all these other things, you know?
Mm-hmm.
These are all the things that he's not. To suddenly being like, you know what? Totally cool with that guy. In fact, I would like to be friends with that guy, you know?
Yeah.
I actually wouldn't mind hanging out or having a chat because now I'm like not afraid of what this person might say, you know?
Yeah.
I'm not afraid of the different opinions they might have. I'm not afraid of the choices they're making with their life, you know?
Yeah.
Especially considering that like 99.9% of all the choices that I would have poo-pooed or dismissed are things that don't hurt anybody, that actually aren't quote-unquote sins, you know?
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that now I'm suddenly like, well, anything goes, you know? Child molester? Cool, let's go hang out. I don't care. No such thing as right or wrong, you know? I love everybody, no matter what. Like, that's not true. But now, like, the red tape required for me to get through to love somebody, like, it's just not there.
Well, and I think you're able to, I was trying to express through my experience, I think that like my love for other people is what led me out of the church in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of ironic, you know.
Well, that's what as a believing member you could never fathom,
right?
And what our believing family members could never fathom, never in
It's
a million years. That like love, compassion, that could be the motivator to lead you outside of the church.
Yeah,
The very source of love itself.
Yeah, and so now, instead of having an organization define for me and tell me what it is that I believe and who and how I should love others, I'm having to figure that out on my own.
Right.
And that takes a lot more thought. And I think that's where I find myself, is that sometimes it is a lot harder. You know, it's like, especially when we're in a very political time right now, like with elections and everything, where it's kind of like that almost sort of like taking the space of the religion. It's like, well, if you believe in this, then you gotta love and do just exactly like we say. And it's like, no, you know, it's like I still need to figure it out on my own.
Right. And I think it's something that speaks highly of your character, that you place such value and you make such effort in reaching across these divides. And I'm in awe of this, and I think that it's one of my favorite features of you, that, you know, what you don't do is slip into these us versus them mentality.
Yeah.
And almost to a fault, you know, you seek to find, okay, what are the commonalities with this person? Can I seek to understand it? Can I try to not just blanket statement say, well, you're X persuasion or X, you know, political party, or your X religion or nationality or whatever it is, and thus I make assumptions for you. And that's really cool.
Thank you.
it's exhausting. But it's really cool.
Okay.
So we're about out of time. And so, final thing I want to do. This is a little surprise I have for you. This is my Valentine's Day present to you. So one of the things that touched me the most, I think, in 2016, there was a lot of deaths. Everybody knows that. It's the meme of 2016.
Mm-hmm.
Took everybody. But one of the things that, like, for some reason impacted me the most was Patton Oswalt's wife passed away very unexpectedly. And the eulogy of sorts that he wrote for her was very touching. And I recommend everybody listening to, like, go find it. I'm not going to, like, read it here. But it was very honest and level-headed. And it was not sappy, but it was what I thought was, like, a very fitting tribute to this person he loved. And so I was thinking that, none of us are ever going to get to hear our eulogies. Like, what would the person that you love say about you on your death? And so I sat and I thought, and I said, if Rachel was taken from me, what would I write?
You Googleized me.
I Googleized you. So this is my eulogy to you, that if you were to die today, what I would write and have published.
So morbid and beautiful.
Well, we'll see after it's done. Here it goes. There are those whose deaths flatten you. They thrash you to the ground, grip your throat, and force you to witness the awful truth. That if death can come to someone as vital, as essential, as alive as they were, death must come for you too. This was who Rachel was for me. She was the love of my life. However, in saying that, I fear I conjure the image of a single thing, a grand capital L love that sat like a trophy on our mantelpiece. No, our love was one that was earned. It was 1,000 little loves, burned down and reborn 1,000 times over in the 2 short years that we were together. The girl with the curly auburn hair I fell in love with on a Sunday was not the same woman I was in love with on the day that she died. They say the only constant is change, and how lucky I was to change with her. To watch her as she grew more beautiful, with every new haircut, with every laugh line, and with every stretch mark. To see her grow in courage and wisdom as a mother who sacrificed so much for her children. To witness a fierce and independent woman come roaring through the darkness of despair. For 15 years I bore witness to the all-encompassing transformation of girl to woman, and it was equal parts thrilling and a bit terrifying. The fear came from the understanding that our love was not a guaranteed thing sealed upon our heads, but something we had to choose every day. The more we grew, the more we recognized how fleeting our love was, how fleeting life is. And so, with the clarity of a winter's morning, we chose each other again and again, and it made our love fierce. Rachel, I will truly miss you so much. Your death took with it the best piece of me, the piece that only felt truly at home in your arms, the piece that could express an inside joke with a single glance, the piece that saw the last bit of magic in this world in your touch. Rachel, I love you. I will never stop. To know that one day our love will become pure, unencumbered by physical bonds, unraveling and reassembling into the natural beauty we both enjoyed so much, gives me great hope. Just as you raged and revolted in life, never accepting the easy path, demanding the path that was right, I will rage in your stead. Your children will be nurtured with your legacy to guide them, And just like our love, your memory I will fight for every day for the rest of my life. I love you. Rest in peace. I love you.
I love you. Got me in tears.
Thanks for being on the podcast.
And so ends the 9th episode of the NAG. So what did we learn today? First, we learned that writing your wife a thoughtful eulogy has a pretty good chance of getting you laid. Second, empathy and love can come easier when unburdened from the judgmental attitudes religion can foster. And third, love doesn't have to mean anything to be meaningful. Love isn't a given, it's a choice that we make every day. So as atheists, let's make the choice to love, even if it means loving those who do not love us. This is Sage saying thanks for listening, and I'd love for you to tune in next time for the season finale of the New Atheist Guide to Not Being a Total Asshole. Love ya.
King Saul fell on his sword when it all went wrong, and Joseph's brothers sold him down the river for a song. And Sonny Liston rubbed some tiger balm into his glove. Some things you do for money, and some you do for love, love, love. Raskolnikov felt sick, but he couldn't say why. When he saw his face reflected in his victim's twinkling eye. Some things you'll do for money, and some you'll do for fun. But the things you do for love are gonna come back to you one by one. Love, love is gonna lead you by the hand into a white and soundless place. Now we see things as in a mirror dimly. Then we shall see each other face to face. And way out in Seattle, young Kurt Cobain snuck out to the greenhouse, put a bullet in his brain. Snakes in the grass beneath our feet, rain in the clouds above. Some moments last forever, but some flare out with love, love, love.
Thank you for listening to Infants on Thrones.